Hey everybody, my name's Christine Burke, and I'm a forensic genetic genealogist, retired detective and sergeant, investigator, and law enforcement expert, and welcome to Help Solve the Case. I pledged to do a live overview of this book, Broken Plea, by Christopher Whitcomb. And I actually can't because there is so much in there. I can't even get past the prologue to the first chapter. There's so much freaking me out and things that I want to comment on. Things that I think are important. Things that I have questions on. And there's just no real way to do that except for me to go through it. And you'll see the way that I'm going to try to do it. And then you're going to have to read this. You're going to have to read this and get a notepad. Because I'm blown away. I am absolutely blown away, which I'll get into. But that's my thought, is I'll just go through it piece by piece and talk about the things that stand out to me, but you're just going to have to read it. And then we can come back and talk about it. I thought that there would be maybe, I don't know, one or two things based on some of the news media or whatever, but there's just bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. And I feel that if I try to document it, I won't give each point of it the full status that it deserves. And I know that my thing looks weird, my camera looks weird in the bottom, but be able to stop and start and do this, we're just going to have to deal with the camera as it is. And most of you listen to me. So yeah, let's just get started. I mean, this is just crazy stuff that I don't know how to adequately respond to, but I'm going to talk about it and then we'll talk about it. So purchase the book. It is available on Amazon, and I'm just going to compile it. So I'm just going to read it and talk through the things that don't make sense to me, or talk about how I feel they affect what we're doing, and we'll go from there. All right. So thanks for watching. Get the book and we'll go through it. We'll make of it what we will. All right. We're talking about the Kohberger case, right? And the first thing here, this expert talks about referring to outrage amongst a lot of people when the plea came. And I was shocked. From many perspectives, I was shocked. I was grateful. I didn't understand it. And because I was really looking forward to the case. As a forensic genetic genealogist, what was going on was questionable to me. If you guys have watched my videos about some of the challenges, if you want more, I can go over documents. We've got some other cases to look at too, but the families say they weren't even notified in agreement until after the whole thing had been arranged. And witnesses in limbo, law enforcement officials not advised, consultants, experts, being prepared to go to trial, heard it on the news. These things take planning. These trials and all this stuff takes planning. And a plea. Now, I have seen cases where pleas just come about, but there is discussion. And typically, in law enforcement, the prosecution talks to the victims because they want to make sure that everybody's okay with it. So this is just, right? This is where we're starting with what the heck happened? Because we're all shocked, right? We're still shocked. And wait till you see this stuff. You're going to be more shocked. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the judge. This is the commentary at the beginning of the book about, I believe this is in the prologue, about the beginning of the plea agreement. And the author is talking about how Hitler, that's the judge, knows that a plea agreement may forever seal details of an investigation already blurred opaque. And yes, we didn't know a lot of nothing, okay? Which is kind of like, I live in Arizona, the Nancy Guthrie case that's going on. Like, we don't know nothing. And he writes, the moment Kohberger's sentence is pronounced, the killer will disappear into the anonymity of a life behind bars. The truth will die with him. No one will ever find the murder weapon. There will be no revelations of motive or means, no real sense of how or why. Okay? Speaking of other cases, Rex Heerman, he pled. Boom, right? Like, okay. But he's agreed, whether he's really going to do it or not, but he's agreed, part of his plea was to provide information, which, helps us in all manner of ways. So this is the truth, that a plea is a plea is a plea. Okay? And everything is done at that moment. So yeah, we're kind of like, reading a great book and then the last chapter is ripped out and you can't finish it, right? The end of the story is not there. It just drops off a cliff. This is another part here that is interesting to me. And this again is the judge talking about, and he's talking to the defendant, and he's saying that you understand the nature of the charges and you're going to plead guilty today. And the defendant says yes. And the judge tells him, this is very interesting. He says, as I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement. But the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement? Which I don't know why he said the last sentence. But typically a plea agreement is a plea agreement concerning the sentence. And the plea agreement is the maximum. So why are you taking a plea? Again, I'm not talking about guilt or innocence at this point, but anybody, guilty or innocent, why would you take a plea that's for the maximum? Does that make sense to you guys? I mean, I just don't understand that. Like I said, I'm going to go through and tell you things that, like, there's so many. I'm like, what's going on? All right, they're talking here. Now they're going through the counts of what he's going to plead to. And they're starting with burglary. Okay? And burglary is typically, and as a cop, you can recite this language by heart, to enter or remain in a structure or conveyance with the intent of committing a crime therein. Okay? So he's being charged with burglary. Is it needed? I don't know. Did they load him up with it? I don't know. But the burglary here, so he's explaining the burglary, that on or about November 13th, you unlawfully entered the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. So what the judge is saying, even though he's talking about the burglary charge, he's saying you went in there knowing you were going to kill people. Okay? Again, we don't have the story. We don't know what happened. But that's what the judge is saying. Like, with this burglary, we're showing with this burglary, because remember, it's to enter or remain with the intent of committing a crime. And the crime is murder. Okay? All right. So the judge starts, he's going through the charges, and the judge is saying to the defendant, as to count 4, the state would have had to proven that on or about the same date in Latta County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice I think it's supposed to be a forethought with an A, but I'm not sure. Malice of forethought. I don't know. Y'all can check it's in the book. It got read. I thought it was a forethought, but murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her for which she died. Okay, so that's, here's what the author says. What the judge does not tell the world is that Xana fought violently for her life, wrestling with her killer on the floor of her room in a pool of blood. In this hearing, details about valor in the face of horror somehow fade, muffled beliefs beneath legal jargon and statutory prose. Here, only the butcher wins. In his commentary here, again, this author has gone through the discovery. I haven't. I don't know if you have. He's seen it. Okay? All of it. The unredacted parts, as far as I know. And my question here, again, this is not about the victims. This is just trying to understand. This author, Mr. Whitcomb, is talking about details of the case that we didn't know. And me, as a law enforcement expert, as an investigator, retired cop, I consult in different areas. I look at different things. I try to understand. I work on cases to solve these things. And one of the questions that I've had here, yes, we're talking about it specifically about forensic genetic genealogy, but you're not going to take the cop out of me and the person that goes through the evidence and all that stuff. And what I don't understand here in this statement is wrestling with her killer on the floor of her room in a pool of blood. And we have nothing on Bryan Kohberger. I mean, no evidence on Bryan Kohberger. We don't have sweat, hairs, fibers, blood, skin under the finger. We got nothing. I don't understand. And this is just one victim. I don't understand. I'm confused. And you guys probably are too. That's why, like I said, I have to go through this piece by piece because I have these questions. Okay, now in this section, the author, Mr. Whitcomb, is going through the sentencing, the plea agreement and the sentencing. I don't know if he got sentenced the same day, but he's going through the plea agreement. And this is the author writing. And he says, at this point, the judge mentions a plea form and some paperwork and goes through the whole thing again. You have to sign a paper. Did Kohberger go to the house? Yes. Did he intend to commit murder? Yes. Did he kill each of the 4 young humans, each identified by name? Yes. Kohberger says yes. He did it all. And then they turn it over to the prosecution. And this is where more questions start to come. Thompson, who's representing the prosecution, the author describes him. But this is what the prosecutor said. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' house or was residing back in Pennsylvania in his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Okay, so this is before the crime, all right? This is where they believe they're tying this gun, the gun first, and then the sheath, okay? Now, we can also look at why was it purchased on an Amazon gift card? So, was it purchased from his Amazon account? Or I don't even know. Can you make a purchase on Amazon without an Amazon account? Because purchasing on a gift card Well, A, it's going to be delivered somewhere. That would be a question. Where did it get delivered? Did he purchase it in his account, or did he, I don't know. Like I said, can you purchase without an account? Where did he ship it to? Why did he use a gift card? To try to be untraceable? What did they trace about that? That would be really interesting, because we know, Big Brother technology knows everything. Again, we didn't hear that part. Not that I know of. We didn't hear that part. All right. In this section, the author is talking about what would be the point in writing a book about the story we already know. Well, I don't think we know the whole story. Do you? I don't think we know the whole story. And what he says here, he's referencing Brady versus Maryland. And let me read this first, but where the federal government ruled that prosecutors must disclose all evidence to the defense, meaning Bill Thompson had to give everything to Ann Taylor, who's the defense attorney for Mr. Kohberger, and then the information went out to the experts. And he says, I thought he had all of it. He apparently doesn't. Two of those experts, seeking transparency, provided him with a large chunk of the Brady disclosure. 59,000 files, more than 200,000 largely unredacted exhibits, from autopsy photos to the context of Kohberger's phone. I have reviewed it all in my research for the book. Now, there's been some scuttlebutt posted from the defense referring to one of the, I believe it was a defense witness who might have been the one sharing this, but cops think about Brady for getting on the Brady list, getting in trouble, not being truthful in court, things like that. But Brady, as it comes in these defense cases, is not sharing exculpatory information, not sharing information that helps the defense put on their case, whether we like it or not. And this is an unpopular stature to take on the defense role or look at this case from a defense position. But you have to think, what if, right, we have a constitution. What if something happened to me? What if I got unfairly accused, falsely accused? What if my child got falsely accused? You want every protection under the law. So we have to look at these laws that come into play, and Brady is a huge one of them, that everything needs to be known. And part of that was when I was talking about the genetic genealogy in my other recordings about, that's why the defense was asking, where's the tree? How did you get from point A to point B? What databases were they in? Where were they? How did we get from nothing to trial today, or, to the court case, to the prosecution in court? Like, how did all that happen? They get access to all that information. The prosecution's supposed to supply it, okay? And that's where Brady comes in. And exculpatory. Exculpatory means anything that might show the defendant didn't do it. And this is where we're going to get a little, like I said, there's a lot. I'm just going to keep going. There's a lot. Okay, now we are still going through, in the quotes, the author is saying what the prosecutor said. Okay, Mr. Thompson. So here he's saying, compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residences, then showed the defendant's car, the white Elantra, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting at around 3:30 or so in the morning. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defendant's car had entered the area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above 1122 King Road residence. And here's the kicker. the author, Mr. Whitcomb, says nothing in the files I reviewed showed anything of the kind. So, just so you understand where we are here, I'm not a lawyer, I can explain this right. And this is what I believe Mr. Whitcomb is trying to explain here. When the defendant takes the plea, they have to go through the statutes, okay, which they burglary and the homicides, okay? And that's unfortunately going into the detail about what happened, the premeditation, the stabbing, the things like that, the gory details, unfortunately, because you have to meet the elements of the crime. You have to prove the crime. The prosecution in a plea puts on their summary of how those facts unfolded, and that is what the defendant is agreeing to when he pleads. Okay? So here, my question is, if Mr. Whitcomb, I believe he's a former FBI agent, he's saying, right, so here's the state's story that his car was doing all this, and he's stating that as fact, and the FBI guy, the author here, is saying, I didn't see nothing about that. What? That doesn't make sense. And again, I don't know, you might enjoy this, you might not enjoy this, but like I said, I thought we would just have a discussion about a general couple of things, but I'm not even through the prologue. Like, this is crazy. I'm hearing this stuff like, what are we supposed to say about that? That he didn't see anything like that. Well, where was that? And going back to the first part, what we talked about, the author says, once it's done, it's done. It's done. We're not going to get any answers. Maybe that's why he's writing this book. Okay? I don't know. I'm confused. I didn't follow the case closely. I looked at it for genetic genealogy, but I don't know what to make of these things. And this is why I'm doing this way, so we can talk about them. I don't know what's going on. All right, here's more facts, okay, from the state, in quotes. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Goncalves. Now, the author writes, and this is, I'm not including it for salacious details. I'm including it because the author is saying that stuff is missing. And that bothers me, and that's concerning to me, and I have questions. Okay? So to continue, so the author, listens to that or read that, and then he says, the courtroom hangs on every word as the narrative builds. Maybe he was in court, I don't know. But there is no mention of the fact that Kaylee was asphyxiated to the point of petechia, beaten so severely her skull, palate, and orbital bones were fractured. That's horrific. He says this was a crime of rage. So again, like I said, not to be salacious, sensationalize it, but as a cop, why would this have happened? Who is he after? Rage, okay? Like, that's overkill. Overkill. If asphyxiation is one method of killing, petechia, that's when you get bloodshot eyes. And so we got strangulation, and we have beating, and we got stabbing. But again, I don't want to keep saying that. I'm at a loss. I'm dumbfounded. All right, now the prosecutor continues here describing what happened, right? The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath. And I go all through that in the other videos. Now, the author says Thompson, that's the prosecutor, does not mention seemingly significant flaws in this part of his case, including FBI laboratory reports that the state's DNA sample may have comprised less than 10 human cells. Okay, I'm going to get to that. He does not mention the fact that the DNA sample was first sent to a private genetic genealogy lab in the Woodlands, Texas, where it was traced to, quote, 4 brothers, none of whom were named Kohberger. He does not mention a potentially catastrophic chain of custody issues. I don't think the A should be there, or the plural should be there. Sorry. He does not mention, I would think, potentially catastrophic chain of custody issues, or the fact that handwritten Idaho State Police evidence retention forms note that the sheath was found not on the bed, but on the floor. Okay? So, as we were talking about before, if you've watched the other videos, it sounded like, from what we read, that Idaho State Police developed the extract. Okay, that's the DNA that they were going to work with to do the forensic genetic genealogy. And if I remember correctly, they were worried about not having enough. And so that's why they went right to FGG. They didn't go to YSTR. But we also hear about no hit in CODIS. So it's very confusing. And 10 human cells. Okay, then we also talked about, or the witnesses talked about, that somehow the DNA itself went to the FBI. So that, and remember, and that's why I wanted to go through that first. The Othram file, that's the Woodlands lab. Remember, their file was so much smaller than the FBI's, and it sounded like, I could be confused, but it sounded like the FBI pulled their own genetic material again, or they were using the same. Remember, if you watched that, I was using the half a cup and the eighth of a cup. I just don't know how all this DNA was left from one little tiny piece on the sheath. Like, this is so interesting to me because I haven't heard this before. Okay? What do we do with that? Okay, here's some more. This is the state talking. The state's evidence would show that Zaina Kernoodle was still awake at this time. Now, I remember, and again, don't fault me, I didn't follow this too closely, but I remember somebody got like a DoorDash or something. But I wasn't sure if that person was still awake. So, says Zaina was still awake at this time. Her room was not on the 3rd floor. It was on the 2nd floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Zaina, and he ended up killing her also with a large knife. I never heard anything like that. Did you? That she was leaving? Coming down the stairs? I thought the food was picked up prior to this. So what was she doing coming down the stairs or leaving? Like, Have you heard that? I haven't heard that. So the author continues. He says, Thompson does not explain that Xana died 30 feet from where she was first attacked. 30 feet. That's a pretty good distance. He does not explain the forensically impossible trail. Now, these are his words. Don't come at me at this. Get the book and read it yourself. He does not explain the forensically impossible trail of apparently altered evidence Xana left along the way, including blood spatter that was diluted with an unknown substance. Okay, I told you guys, like, this is like, there's no way that I could just go through this live. Like, I'm still not through the prologue. I don't believe I've gotten no, I'm still in the first part. He does not explain how two survivors in the house did not notice her screams, though the audio recording from a surveillance camera down the street did. He does not explain how Xana's boyfriend, a 6'4", 228-pound football player, never got out of bed to help her as she fought for her life just 3 feet away. So it sounds like, was she coming down the stairs and then went back into a bedroom where her boyfriend was to try to get help? Like, who knows? Thompson does not mention that Ethan's undiluted blood. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. Like, what does that mean? Diluted blood. What is that? What is that? Thompson does not mention that Ethan's undiluted blood was found at the top of the stairs leading down to the first floor. Other stains somehow hidden under a box of White Claw beverages. He does not mention apparently overwhelming forensic evidence of a crime scene alteration. I've got another snip. I'll put that up there, but what the frick? Okay, diluted blood. His blood coming down the stairs. How did that happen? So did he walk down the stairs? Did she carry his blood down the stairs? But sounds like she was already coming down and then went back up. Like, did the defendant, the suspect, I don't want to say the defendant, did the suspect get it on him and kill him first? Like, I am so confused. I'm so confused. And then what's this about the White Claw? Other stains hidden under a box of White Claw? So the killer was like helping himself to White Claw? Or whatever? Reorganizing the house? Okay. And then the author says he does not mention apparently overwhelming forensic evidence of crime scene alteration. Let me get the other slide. Okay, so he had mentioned, right? He said, in our other thing, he said, he does not, this is the author's words, that the prosecutor does not mention apparently overwhelming forensic evidence of crime scene alteration, a cleanup of the house's common spaces, or the highly likely involvement of a second assailant. When did that happen? I mean, can you see my eyes blinking? Like, when did that happen? The author goes further. Thompson does not address the fact that Ethan's naked body was covered with a blanket sometime after he was dead. By who? Whom? He does not divulge evidence showing that despite a trail of blood from Maddie's room on the 3rd floor to Xana's on the 2nd, not a drop was found in the bed where Ethan supposedly died at the hands of a lone offender. So I think what he's saying is that the killer would have been up in Maddie's room and got blood on him and trailed it down to Xana's on the 2nd. But yet when he went in there to kill Ethan, he didn't drip any. So he dripped it all the way down, but didn't drip it into the bed. It also says there's no mention This is crazy. There is no mention that a clump of hair was discovered in Ethan's closed fist, presumably pulled in a fight with his killer. There is no citation of laboratory evaluation because there was none. The hair, labeled debris, was never examined beyond color and length. There was no attempt to identify his source using DNA. I mean, we can do great things with hair. Rootless hair. He had a clump of it in his hand. Whose hair was it? I'm sounding like Nancy Grace. Like, what? I'm confused. I'm confused. Let's keep going. Okay, we're still in the part where the prosecutor is giving his summary of what happened so that Mr. Kohberger can make his plea. Okay, so he's saying, this is the prosecutor saying, during the course of this killing, one of their roommates awoke, looked out her door, not knowing what was going on, saw the defendant. Okay, let me stop there. So that's not Zena coming down the stairs. This another one was up and running around. Okay. Saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black belt, holding some sort of container in his hand, and she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where the sliding door is that I mentioned before. Was that the White Claw? I mean, who heard of a belt? I mean, have I missed everything in this case? Like, so now the author, he's going to critique it. He said, this is interesting. Yeah, it is. It's interesting to me. Okay. Thompson, that's the state, is talking about reports attributed to surviving witness, we'll say DM, body camera footage recorded by Moscow PD officer Mitch Nunez, which apparently the author has seen, proves his statement that Dylan never mentioned the belt or the container in her first interview Sunday afternoon standing outside the house. She did not mention it during her second interview later that afternoon. She didn't discuss the belt or the container until days later in the presence of her lawyer during an interview with Idaho State Police Detective Vicky Gooch. Now, I'm not for anybody on here. I mean, I'm for justice. And I'm certainly not trying to help Bryan if he's in fact a killer. But let me just tell you, in the people that have gone through traumatic stuff and I identify, like, they are like vomiting what the person looked like. And we asked them again, like, any identifying information. Okay, a belt is distinctive. Carrying a container, like, my mind is going all kinds of, I don't even want to go to those places. Silence of the Lambs. Okay. Why would she only remember that with her lawyer? Okay. Then I didn't highlight it, but it says, when asked what she remembered, police reports show Mortensen says she didn't remember much of anything. So she doesn't remember anything. I know she could kind of be in shock, but let me tell you, if 4 of my friends were murdered, you bet your whoopee, I would be implanting that in my mind, exactly what I saw. And let me tell you, if I saw some dude in black with a balaclava, however you say that, ski mask, and I heard screaming, and he's in my house at 4 a.m, you betcha I'd be calling 911. I would probably be like fighting him, and he's carrying something. I don't know. The whole thing from the beginning. I mean, we haven't heard a lot, but the whole thing from the beginning, like I told you guys. Okay, so here's another section, and it talks about, again, this is the state saying at the top, at approximately 4:20 that morning, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And the author writes, white car, yes. Defendant identified as the driver, no. Fair point. The state continues. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. The author says, meaning no one knows anything at all about where the car went. So they don't have the car anywhere. It's kind of like Nancy's car, right? We don't have a car there either. Okay, I have to add a little bit about this here. If you remember, when we were talking about the videos, about the court challenges, and I spoke about eventual discovery, that when the defense was, sorry, I'm trying to get it back in my head. When the defense was asking about what happened when, and do you remember we had the testimony that the witness, the corporal, the detective corporal from Moscow PD, can't think of his name, he said they had nothing before the tip from the FBI with Bryan Kohberger's name. Now, if the genetic genealogy, right, and we talked about, well, let me go back. With the genetic genealogy, if that would have been thrown out, leading to Bryan's name, they would have tried to say eventual discovery. And who knows? But at that point, they had looked at all the surveillance video and didn't have a suspect, according to what the detective said. So if we didn't have the genetic genealogy in general, which we need it, but if it got thrown out for improper procedure, would we be where we are today? Would they have gotten from point A to point Z without that tip? And I believe that's what the defense was trying to get to, and she unfortunately didn't get to it, or tried to get to it, and the judge said no. But that's what I believe, okay? So that's why, to me, the car's important. Okay, and like I said, you got to read this all the way through. I'm just giving you the bullet points that I wanted to talk about that stood out to me, okay? So this, again, is the author talking, and he's talking about an assertion made by the state. And he says it's misleading because he says analysis by the FBI's cellular analysis survey team, we know of them, CAST, right, shows tower connections to Kohberger's phone, but their graphically animated courtroom presentation only claims accuracy to within 13 miles. And he says, this is Mr. Whitcomb, despite prosecution assertions, cell pings place Kohberger nowhere near the scene. And cell technology and all that stuff, maybe I can get a cell phone expert on. It's fascinating. But, like, how troubling is that? How troubling is that? I told you guys. There's too much stuff. Okay, this is another interesting one. This is where I kind of got a little confused when I was talking about the knife earlier, because I thought it was this, okay? So not only did he apparently get the first one in March of 2022, he then, after the incident, according to the state, began searching for a K-bar knife and K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. So he's going to get another one? He's going to do more? Is that what they're saying? And does that mean that he used his own Amazon account? Right? Like we were talking about? Crazy. Okay, here we go again. This is the author writing this. FBI guidelines for DNA submission to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, require a minimum sample for short tandem repeats STR identification. Okay, there's minimums of what you need to have. The DNA sample obtained from the knife sheath was determined to be significantly less than what the FBI required to make a forensic match. So how did they confirm it? Because, and again, I'm thinking, because we read it, if you listen to it, they took STR and got no hit, but they didn't do YSTR. And when you confirm a suspect or his father from the trash pull on a familial match, you use an STR. So I don't know where that came from. Right? Again, I don't know what, like, so many questions. We'll keep asking them. Okay. I mean, I love this one. And I don't mean to sound sarcastic. But this is the state again talking. I can tell the court, public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Nothing of evidentiary value is found. Nothing. Nothing. Not a thing. Nothing. Not a sneaker. Not a hair. Not a receipt. Not a crumb. I mean, not underwear. Not blood. Like nothing. Like you didn't take anything. Nothing. Okay, so here's the author's questions or statement. This is where I think we're done with the prologue. Okay, we only got that far. You got to read it. It's crazy town, I'm telling you. So here's what he says. What the world actually knows after 2.5 years of investigation comes down to a few undisputed facts. Within the walls of the 3-story structure at 1122 King Road, 4 young students were cut down in the prime of life. Yeah. On the 3rd floor, Kaylee Goncalves lay beaten, smothered, and slashed, with Maddie Mogan cuddled beside her, posed as if napping. Napping? Napping? That doesn't make sense. On the 2nd floor, Zainer Kernodle was found, and I apologize, spread eagle in a sprawl of coat hangers and shoes, with her boyfriend murdered in bed just a few feet away. again, this is the author. What the world does not yet know is that Bryan Kohberger's guilty plea may have negligently whitewashed one of the great travesties of modern jurisprudence. In lieu of a trial, no one will ever know how a lone assassin with no ties to any of the victims entered a house on King Road in the middle of the night, committed 4 murders in around 4 minutes, and escaped without a trace. What were his motives? Who was his target? Why did he not kill 2 witnesses who waited 8 hours before calling police? Remember, the roommate, the other one, saw him in the hall with the belt and leaving with the container. So he knew there were more witnesses. Okay? That's what the author's saying. Like, okay, like, so now he's saying, like, we got to examine this further. Okay?